Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight I'm proud to announce the first episode in Sword and Sorcery Cinema, a brother show or a sister show, whatever way you're going to look at it, to Sword and Sandal Cinema. Now, I'm a big fan of Sword and Sorcery, and I'll tell you a very quick story before we proceed with our first guest. I was, as everyone knows, raised in a Greek household and attended Greek parochial school. And we had this entire rich mythology that was reinforced on TV with the Mighty Sons of Hercules television show, with the Hercules movies, and also with the Hercules cartoon. So I grew up with all this, and I lived in it, and it absorbed me, and it actually molded my life to an extent nobody could have guessed. When I went to parochial school, toward the end of it, we were introduced to Edith Hamilton and other books like that, like Thomas Bulfinch, and I became aware that Greeks were not the only people with these really cool ancient stories. So it started me on a quest to study the tales of different cultures. And then a teacher had on his curriculum The Hobbit and then The Lord of the Rings as recommended reading, and I devoured it. And that's when I discovered that you could make up mythology. What could be better? So these were fictive works that had these mythic themes, and very soon I got lost in those. So I'd like to pay tribute to those movies, those books, and all the various multimedia that grew around them. And I can think of no better place to start than with Brian Walker of Sword and Sandal Cinema, and also Brian's Drive-In Theater, and very many other things to do. Greetings and welcome, Brian.
Greetings and welcome, Hercules. How are you this evening?
I'm doing fantastic, and I'm curious to know, are you a fan of Sword and Sorcery?
I am, as a matter of fact.
That is awesome. I like all of it, even the really bad ones produced by Roger Corman.
Well, and as you might guess, those are probably my favorite ones.
Yes, some of my favorites as well. And they're all interconnected. It was like a Marvel universe before Marvel attempted it. There were clips that were used in all the films from all the other films, and the actors were very lots of overlapping. And the stories too, like there was the Deathstalker quadrilogy, I guess you can call it, and I was very much enamored of that. And then they came out with the movie Barbarian, which was essentially Deathstalker, except with different names in different places. But I love.
Yeah, when AIP paid for B-roll, they were going to use it in every picture they made that year. So they didn't waste a thing.
No, they didn't. And it was the same. Most of them were scenes from that um, the contest that the sorcerer was holding, where there were the young ladies in the mud pit and acrobats doing acrobatic things and so forth. I've seen those, I think, in every one of their movies. Those scenes from there. Whenever they have a bar or some other gathering place, they have scenes from there of people and pig creatures, things like that being in the bar. It's really amazing.
Well, reusing footage is an old trick, for producers and directors who were making low-budget films. And Ed Wood, for example, used miles, I should say, of stock footage. And American International Pictures made liberal use of stock footage, and any footage that they shot, especially for science fiction films, was going to be reused again. If they spent that much money on the setup and props and things like that, you can better believe they were going to use it at least twice, maybe three times.
Yeah, yes, I can see that. I can understand that, but it creates like weird continuity problems. Like, for instance, Barbarian seems to be on all levels a prequel to the Deathstalker series, because Munkar is a young man rather than a much older man. And there aren't Deathstalkers yet. There's a barbarian named Cain. And it seems like a more prehistoric film than the Deathstalkers, which followed it. And yet they have clips from Deathstalker in there, filling out a big chunk of the movie. And with Deathstalker, there are three different Deathstalkers, each one phenomenally different. And now there's a Deathstalker comic book that's out with another Deathstalker that makes references to the films, but is not the same Deathstalker. and they're making a new Deathstalker film on Kickstarter. There's a place where you can donate money toward making it happen.
You know, the most interesting thing, well, one of the most interesting things that I find about Deathstalker, other than the fact that, Roger Corman um, cranked out about 10 of these, uh, and mostly shot in Argentina, I believe, is that Lana Clarkson is in it. And she was one of the people I wanted to talk about tonight, interestingly,
Fantastic.
because, well, and she, oddly enough, she doesn't have, a huge filmography, but the one she has plugs into our topic really well. She was the star of a film titled Barbarian Queen,
I
which
watched that today. Yes,
you did. Oh, well, great.
the 90th time.
Oh, you've seen it that often.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's just tangentially related because of the title. But have you ever seen Amazon Women on the Moon?
Yes.
I haven't seen the movie for a long time, but it's hilarious. I love that it's a send up of 1950s and 60s B science fiction movies, and it's almost seamless in its accentuating the genre, really, taking it and exaggerating it for comedic effect, and for what it was worth. But Lana Clarkson in all three movies, really interesting. Yeah, she had an interesting career.
And a very,
She started, pardon me,
very sad ending.
a very sad ending, but an interesting early career. She was pretty young when she got her start in films and television, and I think she did some modeling as well. But in the 80s, she had a shot at it. She was booking some interesting movies, and she had some great roles in those movies. But as for what happens to a lot of actors and actresses, by the time they get into their late 30s, early 40s, they're no longer a fresh face. You can no longer be, well, I guess you can be the hero at that age, but being the ingenue at that age is a lot tougher, unfortunately. And her career just, started sliding pretty badly in the early 2000s. I think her last film was in 2001. And it wasn't a great film. It wasn't a great role for her. At the time she met Phil Spector, the record producer, I think she was a restaurant hostess part-time. I think that's how he met her. And well, unfortunately, we all know what happened later on with her at his hands. God only knows why. Why would you shoot somebody like that? I don't know if the gun accidentally discharged, or if he was just having a manic phase and decided to kill somebody, or what. But it's very, very sad ending to her career.
Happened. I researched it, and there didn't really seem to be definitive answers to what happened or why he did it even.
I mean, he could have. It's any. Well, I mean, he had a long history. He's since passed away, but Phil Spector had a long history of abusive relationships. Quite honestly, if you ever read Ronnie Spector's autobiography, it's called "Be My Baby." I think it was printed in I want to say mid to late '80s. It really tells a harrowing tale about her life. She was essentially held captive in a mansion, which sounds nice. But you being held captive means you're essentially in a prison, no matter what that prison looks like. And like I said, he had a long track record of violence, against women. I'm not sure he ever struck any of them, but essentially holding people hostage. I mean, that's pretty violent. And then with what happened to Lana Clarkson, just so sad. And she was so young. I think she was what, 40, 41 when that happened.
Yeah, she was still young. Well, I'm in my late 60s, so to me, anybody younger than their 60s is young.
I know what you mean. I was talking to, as I was finishing up my second class today and leaving, the other instructors came in my room at about 20 after 2. And looking at college students these days, I have no idea how old they are. They could be 18, they could be 25. They all they all kind of blend in. They all look the same to me.
I look at firemen and policemen. It's like, oh, they're kids.
Well, I know, but when you start referring to 40-year-olds as kids, you know you're up in years.
Here's to being up in years.
Well, yeah, well, yes. Here's to being up in years.
I'd like to dedicate tonight's show in part to Lana Clarkson because I first became aware of her in Deathstalker, where she played the woman warrior who was so horribly killed in that as well. And then she appeared as Barbarian Queen. I don't know if she appeared in the second Barbarian Queen. I saw it. I don't know if I have it somewhere. Um, but most of the footage for the other films, according to what I read, was from Deathstalker and from Barbarian Queen. They produced most of that footage that was rechopped and put into the other movies.
Yeah, she is in Barbarian Queen too.
Oh, she is. Okay.
But I don't know if that's new footage or if that was reused footage. Look, I've not seen. I didn't tell you the truth. I didn't know there was a Barbarian Queen too.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I have these movies somewhere, or I had these movies somewhere. Then the flood destroyed most of my sword and sorcery collection, so I don't know if I still have it or. But I don't remember much about it. I remember a lot about the first film, but I don't remember a lot about the second film. And lately, in preparation for the show, I've been watching a lot of these old movies and reading the comics. And sword and sorcery seems to be making a comeback now. And all the old books that you can get like really cheaply until fairly recently, now they've shot up in price and they're at the do I dish out $60 for like ratty paperback because I enjoyed it once when I was a teenager in my early 20s? I don't know. But it seems to be making a resurgence now, especially with Deathstalker. And I was so surprised that when they got around to making a comic book series, now they're making a movie with Deathstalker. I never thought that would happen.
No, I didn't either. Do you think that this is just the natural progression from all of the Marvel and DC Comics movies? They're unless I'm mistaken, if I read the if my take on how those movies are performing at the box office is any indication, they are sort of on the way out, and I think the action genre needs a place to go, and sword and sorcery would be wonderful.
Well, sword and sorcery, the message is the same as in samurai movies and cowboy movies.
Mm-hmm.
An individual, and not a very like perfect ethically or in any way an outstanding citizen, but just a plain individual is stronger than the power of nations and organizations like organized religion. That's the whole message. And I remember I first became aware of it by watching samurai movies and the karate movies. That's often everything is so structured, and the one hero transcends the structure or doesn't adhere to the structure and manages to topple the civilization. And that's the message of sword and sorcery. Like with Conan, Conan started out a rough barbarian, and he grew to become king of the nation that invaded his people when he was a teenager. And he became the king after many adventures and misadventures. And they weren't the adventures of like a knight or a hero in the traditional sense. Conan was pretty much all about Conan. So it was like, what if Hercules, when he had to make the choice between virtue and vice, chose vice? That's what to me, that's what the whole sword and sorcery genre is. And we need to remember that we're greater than the structures that we adhere to.
I do think that's an interesting moral to the story as well. But I do think, if you identify with a character like that, somebody with a character that is sort of, almost like a deity,
Mhm.
almost godlike, I suppose it would maybe, spur you on to do greater things. And,
Yes,
and I do think that a lot of people are horribly complacent. Yeah, I think 99% of people, to tell you the truth, are so complacent they just get into the middle, and whether they're happy with that or not, they get tired or lazy, and they don't want to strive. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody. I'm certainly not setting myself up.
but you are phenomenally ambitious. You're phenomenally single-minded. Uh, you've
A little single-minded, but I'm not that ambitious of a person. I never was.
you've created an institution that has survived over 25 years and has become legendary. And that's the work of your mind and your hands and your spirit. So you've already attained heroic status for that.
Well, and thank you. I'm glad I can rest. No, the real reason that I, still continue. It's been almost, it'll be 27 years here before too long, in February. The real reason that I kept going with the site was because I wanted more knowledge. I mean, I wanted to know more about it.
Mhm.
And for me, the easiest way to know more about it is to know more about a subject, I should say, is to write about it. That's how I learn best. Is picking a topic and then writing and researching and editing and proofreading, um, going back through it, and to see if this is accurate information, and to see if it's written so that it's easily digested, by anybody who visits the website. Uh, and I'm not sure if I'm not sure that that's ambition so much as just wanting to see a project through. And to tell you the truth, there are many more actors I would love to add to the website. A lot of international actors who routinely appeared in numerous B productions, whether those were European, Asian, or American. Sometimes with some actors, all three, really. And who knows, maybe I'll get back to creating some new content here before too long, because there are some actors I would like to profile, really are.
I'm looking forward to visiting your site when it has those new things. Whenever I go there, I'm surprised by how you've kept the spirit of the site alive despite the many changes. It's still what it was in the beginning, but more so and more polished.
Well, I only have one idea, but I like to redecorate that every once in a while. And my HTML skills are so old, um, that at times it's kind of a challenge for me to make my site look up to date, knowing that the HTML code that I'm writing is essentially 25 years old, because that's my knowledge base, to tell you the truth. But I've found that with decent design and some graphics, you can skirt a lot of that. I mean, you can update it without having to know. I mean, you don't need to be the lead designer from Amazon Web Services or anything like that to create a website. You just need to continue working on it, and a lot of it's trial and error. Does this work? Does this not work? Does this work in some browsers but not others? It takes a little while. But I will say this: the simpler the code is, the more likely it is to present, among, I should say, present well across all of the browsers. And my site typically does that. And I think it's because the HTML is so antiquated. It has to work. Now I run all my code through the W3C, with the World Wide Web Consortium. The World Wide Web Consortium will validate your individual web pages, and you can also choose the what's the certain type of HTML code that works best for your website, and it will validate your website within that. It'll also look for errors, and I have found their validator, their online validator, to be really helpful into pointing out problems with the website. You want to make the website accessible for everyone, and if you have visitors who aren't sighted, you need to pay particular attention to the way your graphics are coded. And you want them to understand that not only is the graphic present, but you want them to be able to read a little something about the graphic, at least who is in the picture or what the graphic represents.
And
And,
that is
and
a
the 3W.
conversation that will have to wait for another day. But can you kindly share with people how they can find you, how they can find the Drive-In Theater? And I'm going to ask you, would you join us on this adventure to celebrate sword and sorcery?
And I would love to join you on that adventure. And if you want to interact with me, please visit my website at briansdrivein-theater.com. I update the website every day. There's a new movie of the day. And we are coming into my favorite season of the year, which is Halloween. So for the next 5 weeks, it's going to be back-to-back horror movies. So look forward to that. There are all kinds of fantastic public domain horror movies out there, and I'm going to run a lot of. If you want to interact with me on social media, your best bet is Facebook. Just run a search for Brian's Drive-In Theater, and I will pop up.
And he is excellent in getting back to you. So that's how this whole conversation that has been going on now for nearly a decade started. So
Yes, it has. It has been very nearly a decade.
thank you very much, Brian. You're awesome. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. You have a whole hour, so we can make up some of that time we lost due to scheduling problems before. Thank
And
you.
I've got a great topic for tomorrow. Thank you very much, Hercules.
Okay, be well. And now our adventure proceeds with Ryan Foley. Ryan is my favorite graphic novelist of Greek mythology. And that's how our relationship started, our conversation, which continues now many years later as well. Ryan worked on He-Man and the Masters of the Universe for a space. And he's written books that are very sword and sorcery-ish. So welcome, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing good, sir. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. Tell me, what first attracted you to the field of sword and sorcery fiction?
Well, so like so many people, I was born in 1974, and just a quick technical thing. I'm not. Is my video not displaying?
Your video's not on, but your name is there.
Okay. So I'm. Oh no, we're depriving. We're depriving the audience of my clearly incredibly like network TV good looks. But so I apologize for not having that available. But so where I got started, so I was born in 1974.
Mhm.
And so I think any kid that's growing up in that era, there becomes what I call kind of the holy triumvirate whenever it comes to those Saturday or the cartoons, not the Saturday morning cartoons, but the cartoons that you would watch whenever you come home after school. And so the three big properties that surrounded around that. So from going in from 1977 up to 1983, you had Star Wars. I mean, that was really kind of that was the big thing. And really, if you go through and you break Star Wars down, it's really a fantasy story. It's much more a fantasy story than it is a science fiction story. If we're going through and we're looking at all, I mean, let's in Star Wars, Luke, a potential Jedi Knight, travels into the Dragon's Den, which is the Death Star. So the Death Star could either be the Dragon's Den or the dragon itself, and to rescue a princess. I mean, that's a story as old as time. But so coming home from school whenever, so 1984. So I'm 10 years old, a little bit earlier than that. So it's around 81 or 1982, I believe, is when Masters of the Universe, the toy line, debuted. The television show doesn't come in until a few years after. But so between G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Masters of the Universe, I consider those to be the big three. And so you come into those, and that begins the journey, because it was a combination of Yes, where you do have a combination of swords and magic, but then you also have a technology aspect to it too. So they were blending a little bit of the worlds. But more importantly, and much the same way, look, I loved the G.I. Joe cartoon as a kid, but it was really the comic books that really made G.I. Joe feel like a really serious thing. And a lot of that was because of the work of writer Larry Hama. But for He-Man, before the cartoon came out, they all came along with these each of the toys that you bought, the vehicles if you bought them, and then if you were lucky enough to have Castle Grayskull, all of them came with these little mini comics.
Yes.
And so and yeah, so those mini comics, it was a much more, it was very serious tone. And so I'm trying to remember because I mean, now granted, this has been a hot minute since I was, 8 and 9 years old. Um, but at some point in there, I was exposed to Conan. And so Conan the Barbarian, especially going back and watching it today, thinking, wow, maybe I shouldn't have been exposed to this, at 8 or 9 years old. But then I believe it was 1984. We have Conan the Destroyer. Conan the Destroyer is a little bit more tempered, I would say, than
More
Conan.
comic booky than hardcore. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. So more action and adventure. But I mean, I remember reading like the novelization of that story. And so to go through and to be a part of that, so that goes through, that's what kind of lights the fuse more or less. And so, so here's He-Man, and it's a big muscly guy with a sword. Okay, well, that can't be that different from Conan. So all right, so let's jump in, let's experience that. And then on and on we go. And so from there, that leads me into in middle school, that leads me into Dungeons and Dragons. So there's a whole new world that gets opened up to me there. And so it was just kind of off to the races. And then unfortunately, Hollywood is not, well, Hollywood, all these industries, they tend to be fairly cyclical. And so I think every once in a while they want to come through and do reimagining. And so once they can do that, uh, so in 2002, it referred to in the online communities as the 200X. But so Mike Young Productions goes through and they start a reimagining of Masters of the Universe, which I believe it's the toy line that comes first, or I'm not entirely certain how the whole timeline goes because I know animation takes a long time, but it was a very concerted effort where they were wanting to go through and okay, we're going to launch this product, so we're going to have toys on the store shelves. We're going to have, so we're going to have the animated series on Cartoon Network, which is going to go along with it. And so what that did is I think it presents this new audience for maybe people who had never experienced Masters of the Universe, but then also it's that same level of nostalgia that we all really pine for these days whenever we're looking for new projects. And so for me, to see that Mike Young Productions come to life, I was absolutely blown away whenever that happened. I was very excited.
There was another series of Masters of the Universe that came out before the reimagining of it. It was more outer spacey, and it took place in the future. And it took place a lot in outer space. Do you remember that?
I believe that was called The New Adventures of He-Man, and I think that's where they were just trying to find any sort of way that they could in order to keep that project alive, to wring a little bit of more money out, to be quite honest. But still, so the reinvention of the brand, the genre with the Mike Young Productions, that was something that I was just heavily invested in. Again, because it's a throwback to when I was 9 years old and playing with Castle Grayskull and He-Man and the action figures and making up my own stories with my figures. And so that it was just a wonderful way for me to go through and reimagine my youth the same way that I did in 1999 when Star Wars The Phantom Menace came out. And all that cynicism that we tend to garner over the years, that just all falls away whenever you're sitting in a darkened theater watching Jedis with lightsabers, and so to be able to go through it and rekindle that area of my youth was just it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. I was an adult, I believe, when it came out, the He-Man, the Master of the Universe, and I picked up the He-Man figure and I read the comic book, and the origins were originally very much different than they became later on. There was no Prince Adam. He was a barbarian from the north,
Right.
and there was a snake goddess that figured prominently in that comic. I used to have it. I don't think I have it anymore. But that story hooked me, and I started collecting the figures. And then the cartoon came out. I was looking forward to the cartoon, but the cartoon was very different, and I didn't resonate as much with the story. I watched them, but the resonance that I had for the that was inspired by the original story kind of faded because they watered the whole thing down.
Right. Yeah. And it's I do know that available. I want to say over at Amazon, if it's still available, I believe that it is. I think that they've gone through and they've done an omnibus where they've gone through and collected all of those mini comics, but in a much larger format. And I've always been meaning to pull the trigger and just I haven't had an opportunity to. It's kind of one of those things that are in my wish list, where I'd like to go back and read them just to kind of remember all those amazing stories that they created, just because the artwork in it, I mean, it was very spooky, it was very scary, spooky without being scary, really, where it was just enough to lure in my imagination as a kid and to be like, oh man, well, now I got to know, how do all these guys, where do they all come from, all their different stories. Yeah, it was just absolutely fantastic for my imagination. I do think that we come along, there's a certain time there that we have in our lives where it just, I don't know if maybe our brains are just particularly malleable, and what we experience within that time frame always kind of sticks with us and shapes who we're going to become. And so I was just very lucky that for me, again, after Star Wars, because after Return of the Jedi in 1983, Star Wars, it fell out of, not, I want to say fell out of favor, but they're not producing anything new. And so kids, we want to move on to what is the next thing. And so for me, it was Masters of the Universe and GI Joe and Transformers. And so moving on to that, that was just the next thing that for my brain to go through and gobble up. And it was another one of those fandoms that I just had to memorize all the names of all the different characters and who they were and what they did. Yeah, so that's an absolutely fantastic memory for me.
Would you like to be on this adventure where we're celebrating those things on a irregular initially, but eventually we'll find a scheduled slot? If you're free to share information about He-Man and the Master Universe, Conan, and whatever other sorcery stars inspired you.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'd be fun.
Oh, fantastic. And what you uttered was very many truths. So before your segment, I was talking to Brian, and I shared how with me, it was growing up with the stories of Hercules, and they were reinforced by the Mighty Sons of Hercules TV show, the Hercules movies, and the Mighty Hercules cartoon. And I discovered in grammar school, Greek parochial school, through Edith Hamilton and other authors, that other people had these old stories too. They were full of magic and strength and cunning. And so I started looking into the legends of other people. Thomas Bulfinch was also a part of that journey too. And then my English teacher introduced us to The Hobbit, and then had The Lord of the Rings as recommended reading. So I devoured that. And that was a significant step for me, because I discovered that mythology can be invented, that it didn't have to be based on something cultural. It could be something pop cultural. And from Lord of the Rings, I discovered Conan with the Frazetta paintings when Lancer Books first put them out. And
Right.
from there, I found the Marvel Comics, and there became a lifelong dedication to sword and sorcery in all its forms.
Well, man, now I'm sorry that I messed up with the tech here. This is only my like
That's okay.
second Zoom call ever.
You're here.
But the second that you said Edith Hamilton, boy, oh, all those neurons in my brain started firing, because yeah, I've got her book, in my closet, and it's not the same one, but yeah, right around seventh grade, that was where really I started to go through and study Greek mythology, and was just fascinated by the stories. I mean, here's these stories that are thousands upon thousands of years old, but we can still take, lessons from those stories. And so, yeah, as soon as you said her name, I was like, oh yeah, I remember reading that, either the stories that she translated, or to go through and have the indexes, where you had like the almost the encyclopedic more entries that explained who all the gods were. So that way you could go through and reference it really quickly. And so it's amazing to me whenever you go through and you start to create these intellectual properties, how you begin to build out this mythos. And I mean, if you think about the number of characters that are available now in Springfield in The Simpsons, I mean, that they
Yes.
have to number in the thousands. And so for all these different, creative people to come together, and sometimes maybe they came up with a character design for Masters of the Universe because they were incredibly high on weed. I don't know what reason they
It
may have
was
come up with some of.
Conan originally. They had the license for Conan, but the movie came out and it was rated R. So they decided not to go with Conan. So they created Conan-esque type of characters, and then the concepts evolved. But originally, He-Man was going to be Conan,
Okay.
and it was the same thing with Hercules and Xena. Originally, that was Conan and Red Sonja that they wanted the license for, but they couldn't get it, or there were some problems with licensing. So they made up, they went back to mythology and took some of the inspirations for those characters and took it from there. And unfortunately, this conversation will have to continue. How can people find you and enter your world and find all your wonderful writings?
On social media, the way that you promote me is probably going to be the absolute best way. My stuff's available on Amazon. If you do a search for Ryan Foley, but there'll be back issues of both the Masters of the Universe comic, if you can find that online. That I did Masters of the Universe Volume 3, Issue 8, and I'd be more than happy to talk about how I got involved with that and the writing process next time.
Fantastic. I look forward to it. Thank you, Ryan, for being here today, for helping us launch this new adventure. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you about these topics in future episodes.
Sounds great. I look forward to it.
Me too. Take care, my friend.
Okay.
And now we move on with this adventure, and we're going to speak with Michele Brittany. Greetings, Michele. How are you?
Oh, greetings, Hercules. I'm doing very well. How about you?
I'm doing great, and I'm looking forward to talking sword and sorcery with you. You and Nick have done sword and sorcery episodes on your show, and also on the Sword and Sandal Cinema. And in fact, your show is named after sword and sorcery paperback that Link Harder wrote about somebody, I think, the Barbarian at the Edge of Time.
I think so. That is Nick. But yeah, we've been doing that show since 2016, maybe 2017. I'm not exactly sure how long, but yeah, we do a lot of sword and sandal, sword and sorcery, sword and fill in the blank. As far as movies that we discuss. So, but I'm excited to be here this evening because we're talking about one of my favorite aspects of sword and fill in the blank, and that's sorcery. And it's nice to be here on your premiere episode.
I'm honored to have you here.
Thank you. So I popped on while you were still talking with Ryan, and was listening to the fact that you came about sword and sorcery through pop culture, and I am the same way. I was a little girl. My dad read a lot of fantasy, and I can always remember I think they were from Del Rey, the Gore stories. There was like 20
Yes.
something, right? And
John Norman.
yes, and I always remember the covers that were done by Boris Vallejo. And so that is my first kind of glimpse into sword and sorcery, are those covers. But I think it wasn't until some years later that my parents had gotten me a 4-book volume of The Hobbit, Fellowship of the Rings, and all those. And I remember reading The Hobbit and just really enjoying, the epic fantasy, and just the ultimate good over evil and things like that, and how there's a real blurring of the lines, really kind of first understanding about kind of that heroic journey that Joseph Campbell has written a lot about, and realizing that heroes are not, they're not cut and dry. They're flawed. They may be an anti-hero and things like that, but it was a whole new kind of storytelling for me. So The Hobbit was kind of an entry to it. And then also, I don't know, I'm assuming you've probably read the books, but do you remember Mary Stewart's The Crystal Cave?
Yes, the Hollow Hills, the Last Enchantment. Yes.
Yeah. So when I think I was in probably junior high, maybe, I saw the Crystal Cave book, and it was interesting. It wasn't like a first edition, and it had kind of an abstract cover, if I remember correctly. But it kind of intrigued me. And so I went ahead and I checked it out. And I didn't know anything about Merlin or King Arthur. So I really kind of came in from the Arthurian legend and all of the mythos associated with King Arthur. And I just kind of followed that trajectory for quite a few years. Crystal Cave, I read all of the books after that one, really enjoyed the magic. I think I became probably an Anglophile after that, reading all those books. And then I lived in England for a couple of years, and that was kind of a dream come true.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but really loved the idea of magic and dragons. And, you know, I think a lot of the story is the concept of being able to kind of escape from every day. And when you're a teenager and kind of getting away from, some of the kind of teenage angst and pressures of, other kids and things like that, and being able to just close that off and drift to another world, really was things that excited me about that story. And then I think around that time, my dad really loved movies. I got a lot of inspiration from my dad, and like a lot of the things that he liked. So like, we'd watch the Sinbad movies and Jason and the Argonauts, and because they'd be in the theater as kind of, a second run or something like that. And so, I can remember seeing Sinbad in the I think can't remember, it's the one with John Philip Law in it, and really enjoying just that.
Seventh Voyage, was that it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I knew it was seventh something, so thank you. And really enjoying those kind of films. And of course, Excalibur took it to a whole new level when that came out in, I think that was 81, I think is when that came out. And I don't think I saw it when it first came out. I probably saw it on like a VHS back when that was the thing. But just again, loving, the story of King Arthur, and Merlin, and the intrigue, the magic, the chivalry, the knights, going on these epic quests and having to, triumph over evil, and it not just being a simple thing. It really kind of, again, allowed me to escape, but it was also giving me, kind of the strength that I can do what I need to do, as a teenager and young adult. So I really liked those stories. And of course, by then it's the 80s, and that's when it really came about, isn't it? Because I remember seeing Conan, the Barbarian. I think that was like one of the first Arnie films that I saw. And of course, I was like, whoa, Excalibur. And now you got Conan. And then you got Beastmaster with Mark Singer, and just all these great fantasy films. So all these things that I was reading over the years, now I got to see visualized on screen, and it just kind of expanded my appreciation and love for the genre. Of course, with that, I mean, you had Clash of the Titans with Harry Hamlin. Again, excellent. So that really kind of kicked off my interest in mythology and lore, with Greek, Roman, and of course, Egypt, has always been a deep passion for me. But, at that time, there weren't a lot of Egyptian movies. So, that's been more recent, since I'm going to say the late 90s with, of course, The Mummy, the 1999 version, that's actually pretty good versus, a lot of the more horror oriented where Anubis is always a bad guy, and he's kind of a cool god. But, you know, over the years, like you were saying with Ryan, being able to expand and get into comics and get into the classics, um, you know, the pop culture was a big help in, bringing about my interest in not just Arthurian legends, but also the mythology that's the classics, the antiquity, stories and the gods and goddesses. And, it's all so fascinating and so epic. And I really like that. I mean, I love science fiction too, but I think I've always been drawn to the fantasy and the fact that you can you can escape into these other worlds and you can find
Yes.
strength and you can bring back into your own life that yes, I can be inspired to be a better person, and to do the things that I want to be able to do, and to be able to triumph over evil and adversity in my own life and things like that. But um I know our time is up in a few minutes, but
Unfortunately, yes, but I would like to invite you and Nick also to participate in the show whenever you're free. I know you both have like very busy schedules. The invitation is open whenever you'd like to be on. I'd love to have you on.
oh, thank you so much. And it's really it's been an honor and a pleasure to be part of your premiere episode to talk a little bit about why I love sword and sorcery, and that I hope that the people that are watching and listening as they're doing other things in their life, that they'll stop and take a look at movies and books and comics. There's so many comics out there
Yes,
that are great. I was thinking about a series, I think it's the Northmen, which is a Viking series that's really, really good. And of course, all the movies that are out there that help to visualize, these other worlds. And of course, the classics going back to the 80s and being able to watch all of those. They're so much fun. And as you mentioned, Nick and I have our Scholars from the Edge of Time. And this Thursday, we're actually going to talk about, I think it's 1983. It was the movie Crawl. We
yes, I
watched
remember
it
that
last
movie.
night. And I won't give spoilers, but it was a good movie. And so
Yes, there
people
was
will want
Cyclops
to,
in it too.
yeah, yeah. Oh, Cyclops. The Cyclops character was great. Really liked him. But really excited to talk about that. Nick is really excited about talking about it too. So I think it'll be a really good episode.
I'm sure it will be. And how can people find you and Nick to enter the world of the Scholars from the Edge of Time and beyond the Scholars from the Edge of Time? Your HP Lovecast and all the other writings that you've gifted us with.
Yeah, so I do have a website, michellebrittany.com. I'm seldom on there. I'm not the social media person, but I do have an Amazon author page, so you can go there. I'm right in the middle of working, co-editing a book on the Mummy franchise. So that's Universal, Hammer, and then of course all Stephen Sommer films. So it's kind of goes on tangents to that as well. Nick Dyack is where you can get all of the links to our Scholars from the Edge of Time, as well as our HP Lovecast, which is dedicated to Lovecraftian literature, which is kind of associated
Yes.
tangentially with sword and sorcery. So definitely check that out as well.
Howard and Lovecraft were pen pals, so
Yes, they
they
were.
published in the same magazine. So I always intended to read those writings one day that they exchanged with each other. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten to it yet.
Yeah, me neither. So much to read.
That there is. Michele, thank you so very much. I'm honored that you're here, and I look forward to talking to you later in the week.
Oh, sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Hercules. The torch is back to you.
Thank you, and thanks to all our wonderful audience. It might take me a little while to get the program wrapped up. I keep having a difficult time locating the buttons, but that's okay. That's part of my fatal flaws. So thank you all very much. And Michele, just let you know, the heroic path element that you introduced, this show is going to focus on that very heavily. So thank you for introducing it.
Oh, you're very, very welcome.
Okay, good night.
Good night.